Hello, I'm Dr. Jerry Tennant, speaking to you from my office in Dallas, Texas. This morning I'd like to discuss with you my method for treating people with chronic disease. To understand this approach, we have to understand a little bit about some electronic terms. Everyone knows the term pH, but few of us really understand what it really means. pH stands for potential hydrogen, and basically it's a measure of voltage. For example, a pH of 0 is considered a plus 400 millivolts, a pH of 7 is 0 millivolts, and a pH of 14 is a minus 400 millivolts. So what does that really mean? Well, if we think about voltage in our homes, we always think about plus voltage. For example, we talk about having 110 volts coming into our home, and we never think about negative voltage. So positive voltage is what we're generally talking about in a conductive system like a copper wire. However, if we talk about solutions, then we can talk about there being an excess of electrons or an electron donor, and that is from 7 to 14, which means you have a minus sign in front of it indicating that there are electrons available to do work. We can also call that alkaline. On the other hand, if we have a solution that has a deficiency of electrons and it has become an electron stealer, then we put a plus sign in front of it, and so anything from 0 to 7 is looking for electrons or trying to steal electrons from wherever they can find them, and that's also called acidic. So when we talk about their pH being acidic, we're talking about the solution being deficient in electrons or an electron stealer, and when we're talking about alkaline, we're talking about the solution having electrons available to do work. So there is voltage available. Now this is one of the most important parts of the concept, and that has to do with the fact that every cell in the body is designed to run at approximately 20 millivolts. So a cell is doing its job and needs to have some repair work done. It'll kick its voltage up to approximately minus 50 millivolts. At 50 millivolts, the cell has enough horsepower to begin the process of healing itself, and then it goes back to the operating voltage of 20 millivolts. Now, if a cell begins to lose its voltage, then several things happen. At about minus 15 millivolts, you get tired. At 10 millivolts, you get sick. And at 5 millivolts, your organs stop working. Then if you go past 0, that's like taking a flashlight battery and putting it in your flashlight backwards. Obviously that doesn't work, and that's called reversal of polarity. So if you reverse the polarity by going past 0 and get down to a plus 5 or a plus 10 or plus 15 millivolts, then 4 bad things happen. First of all, a reverse polarity damages the DNA in your cells, and the damaged DNA means you've damaged the control mechanism of the cell, and thus you have a cancer cell. So you develop tumors, you develop pain, you get chronic infections, and you have a lack of oxygen whenever you have low voltage and particularly a reversal of polarity. Now once you understand how important voltage is in keeping your system working, you begin to realize that in chronic disease you always have a loss of voltage and often a reversal of polarity, and so the solution for chronic disease begins with restoring voltage. And you do that by putting in enough electrons to push the voltage from down here in the positive area up not only to the 20 millivolts of operating voltage, but you have to get it up to 50 millivolts of electron donor if you're going to heal things. And if you have tumors or serious infections, you have to get up to about 70 millivolts of electron donor status in order for the body to have enough power to heal itself. So putting in electrons to push the voltage back up is key to healing all chronic disease. Here you see that we're at normal operating voltage, and the voltage kicks up to about 50 millivolts to start the healing process. So that brings us to an obvious question that all of us would want to know, and that's, well, I wonder what my voltage is. Well, the way we figure out what a person's voltage is to simply use a computerized voltmeter or ohm meter and measure the various portions of the body, and we can figure that out, and we end up with a chart that looks like this that shows us here what the average total body voltage is and then what the body's voltage is in each circuit. Our bodies have circuits just like our homes. You know, in your home you have circuits that maybe you have one that goes to the refrigerator and a lamp and a wall switch, and then another circuit that goes to the television set and a different light and a different wall plug, etc. And when one of those circuits goes out in our home, then everything that's on that circuit goes out. Well, our body has circuits as well, and those are called acupuncture meridians. But the acupuncture meridians in our body work almost exactly the way circuits do in our homes. They're simply fibrous wires carrying voltage from place to place. So we measure each one of these circuits, each one of these acupuncture meridians, and we can find out what the voltage is. And obviously, as we've discussed, our body's designed to run at somewhere around 20 to 25 millivolts of electron donor. If you have less than that in a circuit, then you know that that circuit is struggling, and you know by how much by measuring the amount of voltage in that circuit. So we've discussed a little bit about putting electrons into the body. Then one of the questions is, well, if I put electrons in, can my body store the voltage? If you think about having a dead battery in your car and you put the battery charger on it, then you come back the next morning and check the battery and you find that it's still dead. What that means is that the plates that are inside the battery that are designed to store electrons are defective and can't store them, and thus you have a dead battery. Now, in our bodies, we use these fats called phospholipids to make our cell membranes and store our voltage. This particular kind of fat has a little ball on the top and has these two little legs hanging down like this. The ball is an electron conductor, and these little legs are insulators. So our cell membranes are made up of opposing pairs of these. Here you see the ball with two little legs, and here's a ball with two little legs. And so our cell membranes are made up of a layer of electron conducting, another layer of electron conducting separated by an insulator. Well, any place in the universe you have two conductors separated by an insulator, it forms what's called a capacitor. A capacitor is simply a device that's designed to store electrons. And so the cell membrane that surrounds every cell is the cell's battery pack. It stores voltage for the cell to use to do its business. Now, if these fats are good fats, then it works the way it's supposed to. One of the problems is that the food manufacturers found that the fats are the primary things that spoil in their foods, and therefore to reduce spoilage and thus improve their profits, they cook the fats so that they won't spoil. If you take a fat and cook it at about 350 degrees for about 5 hours, it turns into something that's very similar to plastic. These plastic fats are known as partially hydrogenated oils, like partially hydrogenated soybean oil, partially hydrogenated peanut oil, etc., etc. All of these partially hydrogenated oils are plastic fats. Another type of plastic fat is canola oil. So if you eat primarily these plastic fats, then when you make a new cell, you'll make the cell membrane out of plastic, and guess what? It doesn't work very well, because if you've wrapped your cell in cellophane, things can't get in and out of the cell, and in addition, the plastic won't store voltage. So we want to know, if we put electrons into your body, is your body going to be able to store it? In other words, do you have a good battery? And we can measure that with this device called the biological impedance analysis device. And by taking this measurement, we get a number called phase angle. And the phase angle is a measure of how efficient your body is at storing electrons. Now, if you are unable to efficiently store electrons, then you need to take in more good fat so you can build more good cell membranes so you can store the voltage. And the best source of fat for making the good cells is actually raw milk. Now, as you know, the offspring of every mammal can grow and thrive on mama's milk. It has everything you need to build good cells and in a balanced form. The problem is that when you pasteurize milk, you cook it. And when you cook milk, you destroy the proteins in it. And then when you homogenize it, you blow the milk through little nozzles, and that breaks the long fat chains into little bitty pieces, and those little bitty pieces are toxic. Just as you can't make a nice window in a house from little shards of glass, you can't make good cells from little shards of fat. But if you get raw milk, then you have everything you need to build a good cell membrane. Raw milk is available in some states. In many states, though, you have to join a milk club in order to get raw milk, and you can find many of those clubs online at a website called realmilk.com. So far we've discussed putting electrons into the body. We've discussed, can you store them? And now the question is, okay, if I put electrons in the body and I have good storage, how come my voltage is low? Well, it can be because your body is leaking electrons. Now, the primary way that we leak electrons is due to having metal in our teeth. If you think of a piece of copper wire that's surrounded by insulation, and you take a knife and cut through the insulation until you're down to the wire, obviously you're going to measure voltage. Now, if you take a tooth where the wire inside is running at around 20 millivolts, and you take a drill and you drill through the enamel insulation until you get down to the wire inside the tooth, and then you put a piece of metal in there, obviously you're going to be able to measure the voltage that's coming out that short, which is the piece of metal that goes down to the wire portion of the tooth. So you can simply take and measure this with a standard voltmeter that measures in millivolts. You put the ground against the side of the cheek, and then the other one on the metal filling, and you measure the number of millivolts. You should not have more than 30 millivolts coming out of a tooth. If you have more than that, then you're leaking voltage. Oftentimes we see teeth that are leaking 100 and even 200 millivolts. If you have that much voltage leaking out of a tooth, then it's going to be like trying to fill up your gas tank in your car with a hole in the gas tank. You keep putting gas in the top, it keeps leaking out the bottom. And so it is with our teeth. If we have voltage leaking out our teeth, then it's generally very, very difficult to get the voltage back up to operating, and certainly back up to healing voltage in the circuit that is causing you to have chronic disease. As you noticed, each of the teeth is wired into an acupuncture meridian, and so when you measure the teeth that are leaking, you can go look and see which circuit it's going to take out. Okay, so how do I put more electrons into my system? Vitamin C, silicon, most of the things that are really useful are electron donors. Now, let's talk about the control of our entire system, because this is also one of the critical elements. The way it works is that our brain has neurochemicals, specifically dopamine, acetylcholine, GABA, which stands for gamma-aminobutyric acid, and serotonin. These four neurochemicals control the way we think, our ability to have fun, our ability to sleep, our ability to heal. So they are the basic control mechanism of the body. Without neurochemicals, we can't heal, because without serotonin, we can't sleep, and most of our healing occurs while we're asleep. So neurochemicals are extremely important, and what you'll find is that essentially everyone who has a chronic illness is deficient in neurochemicals. Now, one of the reasons that's important is not only does it control the way your brain works, it controls all of the cells in your body, because the neurochemicals control the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic and parasympathetic systems, and it also controls your pituitary and pineal systems. Well, the pituitary and pineal control your entire endocrine system, your thyroid, your liver, your pancreas, your kidneys, your adrenals, and your gonads. So if you don't have neurochemicals, this whole system breaks down, and this whole endocrine system, of course, is the control mechanism that tells the cells how to function and how to communicate with each other. So, no neurochemicals, then you can't sleep and heal. No neurochemicals, then your endocrine system doesn't work, and if it doesn't work, your cells don't work. Now, here's an example of where these endocrine systems are located. The pituitary pineal is accessed between the eyes, the thyroid and parathyroid here in the throat. The liver and the thymus is in the center of your breastbone, The kidneys and adrenals are just at the bottom of your breastbone, and your ovaries and testicles are about 2 or 3 inches below the navel. So these are the places that you can measure the voltage in each of these endocrine systems, and then you know how well they're working. If they're not working, you need to restore the voltage, but just as importantly, you need to restore the neurochemicals that allows them to be controlled. In addition, the body uses minerals as on-off switches. So almost everybody that has a chronic disease will also be depleted in minerals. The way you test minerals is by dropping samples of the minerals on your tongue, and they should taste horrible. If they taste anything but horrible, you're deficient in that mineral. The reason it doesn't work very well to do a blood test to test for minerals is because the majority of minerals, over 90% of the minerals, are in the tissues, and the blood is simply serving as a trucking system getting the minerals from place to place. So by testing the minerals, you'll find that you're often deficient in those. So how do you fix the control mechanisms of the body, the neurochemicals and the mineral on-off switches? The most efficient way I've ever found to do that is with frequency. Frequency contains many things, but one of the more important things in it is marine phytoplankton. Marine phytoplankton is a total food. It has everything necessary to replace the things that are needed to build your body. For example, to make a neurochemical, it takes 1 protein and 8 vitamins and minerals. And if you're missing one of those vitamins or one of those minerals, you can't make a neurochemical. So for example, if you're vitamin C deficient, you can't make serotonin, and so you'll be depressed and can't sleep. If you're zinc depleted, the same thing. You can't make serotonin or any of the other neurochemicals, and so you won't be able to think clearly, etc. Now, one of the problems that you find in people with severe chronic disease is that their GI system is shut down and their liver is often not functioning, and so you have a hard time getting the nutrients absorbed. So people who are extremely ill, you're kind of caught in a catch-22 in that they don't have any neurochemicals, but you can't get their system to absorb the raw materials needed to make neurochemicals. And that's one of the real beauties about frequency. The marine phytoplankton are microscopic plants. There are at least 400 of them. And so because they're so microscopic, they'll go right through a sick digestive system and a sick liver, and you'll be able to start restoring neurochemicals and minerals even in somebody who's critically ill. And then nothing else that I know of will do that. And so marine phytoplankton in the form of frequency is one of the most important things you can do for people with chronic disease. Because without restoring neurochemicals, you can't sleep, you can't think clearly, you can't enjoy life, and you can't heal. And without neurochemicals, your endocrine system and your digestive system won't work, and thus you've lost your control mechanism and your ability to get the nutrition it takes to make a new you. So you must use frequency in essentially everyone who has chronic disease if you wish to get them well. Your liver is also a key issue. The liver controls your ability to absorb the materials from your digestion that allows you to make new cells. And that's extremely important because we generally don't get well by taking and making the cells that are damaged work again. We generally heal by making new cells that work correctly. Most people don't realize how often we replace ourselves. We get new rods and cones on our retina every 48 hours. We get a new skin every 6 weeks. We get a new liver every 8 weeks, and we get a new nervous system every 8 months. So the entire body replaces itself every 8 months. And it's critical to give the body the building materials it needs to make good cells, because when a cell dies and it starts to make a new one, it looks to see what raw materials you gave. If all you gave it is plastic fats or toxic things that have been processed, then you have to make a new cell out of the old parts, and that's sort of like trying to build a new house out of materials from a house that's been condemned and torn down. That means that the new house is not much better than the old one that was condemned, and in the case of cells, it means your new cell isn't much better than the one that just died. But if you give your body good materials, over a period of 8 months, you'll make a whole new you. So we have to use these materials, though, we have to have a liver that works that can absorb them. So you have to get the liver fixed, You have to eliminate, the liver is responsible for eliminating toxins from your body. And so if you have toxins in your system and your liver isn't working, then the body stores them in fat cells. And so we get fatter and fatter and fatter because our liver is not working and our body's storing all these toxins over in our fat cells. It also is in control of your immune system. And so if your liver's not working, you're going to keep getting all sorts of infections that keep pestering you throughout your entire system. So you have to get the liver working as well. Now, as you can see, the liver is made up of layers and layers of fat membranes. These membranes are almost entirely made of fat, and there's 35,000 square meters, almost 7 football fields in surface of these membranes, and they work very much like the filter in an air conditioning filter in order to filter out the garbage that's in your system. Remember, this replaces itself every 8 weeks, which requires you to eat at least 10 pounds of good fat every 2 months in order to have enough fat just to replace your liver, not thinking about replacing all of the other cells in your body and replacing the brain, which is also almost completely fat. Here you see a little larger picture of how the liver has all of these membranes in it to clean up things. And so the best source of balanced fat, as we've discussed, is raw milk and cream. We also need oxygen to make our system work, and the amount of oxygen that can be in a cell is dictated by the amount of voltage of the cell. This is called Bohr's law, or Bohr effect. Here you can see in this graph the amount of oxygen that can get into the cell if your voltage is at a minus 30 millivolts is this much. If it drops to 10 millivolts, you get in much less. So the oxygen saturation goes from 100% down close to 80% by just dropping your voltage 20 millivolts. So when your voltage is low, then your oxygen level is low. So people who have low voltage, which is almost always the case when you have chronic disease, will be depleted in oxygen. And of course, the higher altitude you live, the less oxygen that's available and the less pressure as well. And so that's a compounding factor. So let's summarize. People who have chronic illness will always have decreased voltage. They'll often have a reversal of polarity. They will almost always have loss of neurochemicals. They will have deficient minerals, and they'll have a liver that doesn't work. Those things are simply characteristic of almost all chronic diseases. So how do you fix that? Well, you want to turn on the control mechanism. Control the mechanism are the neurochemicals and the minerals. And how do you do that? The best way I've ever found to do that is with frequency from Forever Green. Using the frequency from Evergreen, it takes about 3 to 4 months to restore the neurochemicals and the minerals. And as you do that, then you will see the control mechanisms turn back on. You'll see the endocrine system begin to work. You'll see that the people aren't as stressed because their autonomic nervous system begins to function normally. And then simultaneously with starting the process of restoring neurochemicals and minerals, you need to be sure that the patient has normal voltage. If you have low voltage, no matter what you do, things won't work. It's simply like you can take a brand new car, take the battery out of it, and it's not going anywhere. And so it is with us. If we don't have voltage, nothing we do works. And so we began to restore voltage. The most efficient way is with a biomodulator, but you can also use other things like raw fruits and vegetables, like vitamin C, etc., all of which are good electron donors. And as you begin to put in the electrons and get the voltage back up to operating voltage, then all you have to do